We thought we were just checking if they'd cleaned their room, but we were actually standing at the threshold of a confession we didn't know how to read. Because while we were looking for dirty laundry and empty cups, the room itself was screaming something far more urgent. Something we've been trained to ignore. Welcome back to Silent Surveillance, where we decode the language nobody teaches us to speak. Today, we're entering the most underestimated surveillance zone in any home, the teenage bedroom. Not as parents searching for contraband, not as authority figures demanding order, but as observers learning to read what we've been calling just a mess for far too long. We've spent months analyzing patterns, interviewing psychologists, and reviewing documented cases of what we're calling the Rumiko phenomenon. And what we discovered challenges everything we thought we knew about adolescent spaces. Because that room isn't just reflecting your teenager's state, it's actively translating emotions they don't have words for yet. It's their external hard drive, their processing unit, their confession booth, and we've been treating it like a storage problem. Let's establish the foundation. The Rumiko phenomenon operates on a principle that seems obvious once you see it, but remains invisible until someone points it out. Physical space is emotional language. For teenagers navigating the chaos between childhood and adulthood, between dependence and autonomy, between who they were and who they're becoming, the bedroom becomes the only canvas they fully control. We don't just occupy space, we author it. Think about your own environment right now. If someone walked into your workspace, your living room, your car, they would read you instantly. The stack of unread books signals ambition meeting exhaustion. The coffee rings tell a story about pace and priority. The closed blinds versus open windows reveal how much of the world you're willing to let in today. Now multiply that by the emotional intensity of adolescence. Multiply it by the hormonal storms, the identity earthquakes, the social pressure, the academic demands, the future anxiety, the present overwhelm. The bedroom doesn't just reflect that chaos, it becomes the language for it. We started tracking specific markers, not in a surveillance state way, but in a learning to read what's actually being communicated way. And the patterns emerged with startling consistency. The first marker we identified, sudden and dramatic shifts in organization patterns. Not the normal teenage mess, but changes in the type of mess, or changes from mess to order, or order to mess. We documented cases where previously organized teenagers suddenly couldn't maintain any system. Clothes that were always hung became floor decorations. Books that lived on shelves became furniture. The desk transformed from workspace to storage unit. And when we looked deeper, we found these shifts coincided with internal overwhelm. The external chaos was a direct translation of internal processing overload. But here's what caught us off guard. The reverse pattern was equally significant. Teenagers who suddenly became obsessively organized, everything labeled, everything aligned, everything controlled. We initially interpreted this as positive growth, but psychologists helped us understand what we were actually seeing. Anxiety manifestation. When internal experience feels uncontrollable, we create external control. The pristine room wasn't peace, it was a fortress. We talked to Maya, 17, who described her organization obsession. She told us she couldn't control what was happening at school, with her friends, with college applications, but she could control her room, every book alphabetized, every drawer perfectly arranged. It felt like she was holding something together. Looking back, she realized she was trying to prove she was falling apart by making her space look like she had it all together. The room was speaking, we were just calling it. The second marker we tracked, changes in room rhythm. How often they're in there, how long they stay, when they emerge, how they move through the space. Teenagers who previously treated their room as a place to sleep suddenly spending entire weekends inside. Or the reverse, kids who lived in their sanctuary suddenly avoiding it, sleeping on couches, doing homework in the kitchen, finding any excuse to be elsewhere. We analyzed this with environmental psychologists who explained something crucial. We migrate toward spaces that match our emotional needs and away from spaces that amplify discomfort. A teenager who suddenly can't stand being in their room might not be avoiding the space. They might be avoiding who they are when they're alone with themselves. Jordan, 16, told us he started sleeping in the living room every night. His parents thought he was being social, but really he couldn't handle the silence in his room. When he was alone in there, the thoughts got too loud. The TV in the living room, his parents moving around, even just other people breathing. It gave him something else to focus on. The room rhythm changed. The message was clear. We diagnosed it as a phase, but here's where it gets more complex. Because we discovered that sometimes the room isn't just reflecting emotional states. Sometimes it's actively participating in creating them. And that changes everything about how we should be interpreting what we're seeing. Let's talk about the marker that nobody mentions. Lighting choices. Not whether they turn lights on or off, but which lights they choose, how much natural light they allow in, what happens to their windows. We started noticing patterns. Teenagers who always loved natural light suddenly keeping curtains drawn 24/7. Rooms that were bright becoming caves. But also the reverse. Kids who lived in dim spaces suddenly opening every window, adding lamps, seeking brightness. The psychology here runs deeper than mood lighting. Light exposure directly affects our circadian rhythms, our serotonin production, our energy levels, our ability to process emotion. When a teenager starts controlling light in their space, they're not just setting ambience, they're medicating their nervous system. We interviewed Dr. Patricia Chen, adolescent psychologist, who explained that withdrawal into darkness often signals emotional overwhelm. The nervous system is seeking less stimulation, less demand, less input, but seeking excessive light, especially artificial light at odd hours, can signal anxiety, sleep disruption, or attempts to stay hypervigilant. Both extremes are communication attempts. Alex, 15, described it perfectly. He started keeping his room completely dark. Blackout curtains, no lamps, just his phone screen. His parents thought he was being moody, but actually, the light felt aggressive. Everything felt too much. The darkness was the only thing that didn't ask anything from him. The room was regulating what the teenager couldn't regulate internally. We were just asking them to open the blinds. The fourth marker revealed something we didn't expect: object migration patterns. What appears in the room, what disappears, what gets hidden, what gets displayed. Childhood items suddenly vanishing, posters coming down, photos being removed. Or the opposite, childhood comfort objects reappearing after years in storage. Stuffed animals returning to beds. Old blankets coming back out. We learn to read these migrations as identity negotiations. What stays visible is what they're claiming about themselves. What disappears is what they're trying to distance from. What returns is what they need for comfort during transition. But there's a darker pattern we documented. When cherished items start disappearing, not into storage, but into trash. When photos get destroyed rather than archived. When meaningful objects get purged rather than packed away. We spoke with crisis counselors who taught us to recognize this as a red flag pattern. Sudden purging of meaningful items can signal several concerning states: severe depression, trauma processing, or dangerous ideation about future need for possessions. Sam, 18, looking back, told us he threw away everything that meant something to him. Every photo, every award, every memory. He told himself he was minimizing. But really, he was erasing himself. He didn't think he'd need any of it anymore. His room became emptier and emptier, and his parents thought he was finally growing up and letting go of kid stuff. They didn't realize he was letting go of everything. The room was staging a disappearance. We called it maturity. The fifth marker might be the most obvious and most misunderstood: boundary expressions, locks appearing, keep out signs, resistance to parents entering, extreme privacy demands. We initially approached this as normal teenage development. And sometimes it is. Healthy boundary formation is crucial for adolescent development, but we learned to distinguish between healthy boundaries and isolation signals. Healthy boundaries look like requesting respect for privacy and personal space. Isolation signals look like demanding complete invisibility and separation. The difference isn't just tone, it's the underlying message. One is requesting respect. The other is requesting invisibility. Dr. Michael Torres, family therapist, helped us understand the distinction. When teenagers are forming healthy boundaries, they're actually seeking acknowledgement. They want you to see them as individuals worthy of privacy. But when they're isolating, they're seeking disappearance. They want to not be seen at all. The room becomes a hiding place rather than a personal space. Casey, 14, explained her locked door. She wasn't trying to keep her parents out because she wanted privacy. She was trying to keep them out because she didn't want them to see her falling apart. If they couldn't get in, they couldn't see her crying, couldn't see her not eating, couldn't see her not sleeping. The lock wasn't about boundaries, it was about invisibility. The room became a fortress. We respected their space. Here's what we learned after months of observation, interviews, and analysis. The room eco phenomenon isn't one thing. It's a symphony. Organization, rhythm, lighting, objects, boundaries. They're all playing simultaneously. And reading one marker without the others is like hearing one instrument and claiming to understand the music. A teenager whose room goes from organized to chaotic, who starts spending more time isolated there, who closes all the curtains, who purges meaningful objects, and who demands aggressive privacy isn't experiencing 5 separate changes. They're communicating one coherent message through 5 different channels. We're overwhelmed, we're withdrawing, we're losing control, we're disconnecting from our identity, we're hiding. But we also documented the positive patterns. Rooms that gradually organize without obsession, spaces that welcome selective light, objects that reflect emerging identity rather than erasing past self, boundaries that invite respect rather than demand invisibility. These rooms we're speaking to, we're integrating, we're growing, we're becoming, we're individuating, we're still here. So what do we do with this information? Because knowing the room is speaking doesn't automatically teach us the language. And that's what we're investigating next. Because we've identified the markers. We've learned to read the patterns. But now we need to understand the response. How do we acknowledge what the room is saying without invading the space it's creating? How do we intervene without intruding? How do we help without hovering? The room is talking, but are we ready for the conversation? Next time on Silent Surveillance, the response protocol, what to do when you finally hear what the room is saying. We'll see you there. Keep watching, keep listening, keep seeing what's actually being shown.